Tonight's presentation is titled the Garmin G3X Touch Essentials. And our presenter is Brian Hupe. Brian works for Garmin, and he's the experimental and light sport aircraft sales manager. He's been with Garmin since 2006, serving in the engineering and sales areas. He holds a BS degree in aerospace engineering. He's an instrument-rated pilot, and he's currently building an RV-7. You see a picture of his RV-7 project there in his workshop. So Brian, thank you so much for being with us tonight and helping teach us about the super cool Garmin experimental panel that you're going to be talking about. I'm going to turn control of the presentation over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tim, and want to say thanks again for Tim's help in coordinating this event, and also just a thanks to EAA for having us on. We really appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited to talk about it, and if my screen's coming through okay, I'll dive right in.
Yeah, you're looking good, you're sounding good, so 5x5, all good to go.
Excellent. Okay, so the first thing I'll say, the screenshot you're seeing there, that's actually a picture of our RV-7A panel that we use for a lot of our flight test development. When we develop new hardware products or when you develop new software, this is the platform that we're actively using now here at Garmin to go out and make sure that those things are robust and ready for prime time to go out in the real world. So you're getting a close look at our panel. Hopefully we'll have that airplane up at Oshkosh again this year for people that are curious about it. But it's a fun airplane to have around, and it really does help us out a lot with the the ability to make sure our products are top notch. So first thing I'm going to touch on here, Tim kind of threw me a little bit of a question. I think this is a pretty frequently asked one. Why would I go with a glass panel over just traditional steam gauges? A 6-pack has been around, tried and true. So I threw a few notes together here just to try to cover some of my thoughts. And the first thing really is the hardware design itself. It's come so far in terms of solid state components and what that really means in terms of reliability and things. Virtually no moving parts. The only product that I could think of that we sell for the G3X suite, the family of products that has any moving parts, is our servo, and that kind of tells you something. So there's no mechanical wear associated with things like there would be in some analog gauges. High quality, reliability, and longevity, those are the kind of keys, and so we do everything we can to make sure our stuff's environmentally tested for highly accelerated life testing, all those things to make sure they last a good long time and do their job really well. The other thing is really situational awareness, and as I thought about that, just some key things in terms of scanning. A lot of times people will talk about the traditional 6-pack instrumentation and how you use the wagon wheel type of a scan where you're focused on the attitude instrument and you cross-check the other ones. You could compare that to the picture on the right-hand side where you have virtually the entire 10-inch display as an attitude indicator. There's not really an attitude instrument per se that you're cross-checking. You're always seeing that in the background. When you have airspeed tapes on the left-hand side, altitude tape on the right-hand side, a turn coordinator right in the middle, all that stuff's really centrally located. So you're not turning your head, you're not scanning around the panel, and that's really efficient, especially for instrument flying, of course. Also, just in terms of the situational awareness, you can see things like 3D vision or synthetic vision. You're going to see terrain awareness, obstacle awareness, traffic targets, all those things really nicely integrated. So that speaks to that. Right at your fingertips, you've got all this access to information. Seamless integration. So again, we're bringing all those things into the display, and a lot of expandability. So you can start small and you can continue to add components. You don't have to revamp your panel. And that future growth could be through just complementary hardware products that come out, or it could be through future software enhancements. But it just gives us so much flexibility in terms of what we can do with the product long term over what a traditional 6-pack might do for you. So those are just a few thoughts, and I'm going to kind of leave it at that for now, unless there's questions at the end, and we'll move right into the presentation. So I will say up front, I'm going to talk a little bit about our user interface philosophy. What do we think about when we're designing the pilot interface? This is going to be very focused on buttonology and things for our system. So we're going to do a deep dive into that. I'm not going to get as in depth with features and things. So I'll continue on here. In terms of the user interface philosophy, one thing I'll say, we do design for usability. This stuff gets flown in airplanes, whether it's our RV-7A or other aircraft. We're taking this out in the real world. And we do design it for all flight conditions. One of the biggest concerns that pilots express to us is, well, I've used an iPad maybe in an airplane and it just doesn't work well for me in turbulence. We've actually thought through that pretty extensively, and we were at the forefront of touchscreen design in the certified market with our GTN touchscreen navigators and other products. The key is having a place to stabilize your hand, and that's really what a traditional knob does for you. Gives you a little bit of security because you don't have your arm bumping up and down in the airplane. So the key really is having a place to stabilize your hand, and you'll notice if you get up to a G3X Touch display, there's nice places on top of the display to rest your fingers. You can actually easily access the different touch fields on the display using your thumb across the top of the screen. Or you can use the finger trough, call it whatever you want, but there's a little ridge along the bottom of the display that you'll see there. You can rest your fingers on that ridge, and then you can use that to stabilize your hand while you're touching the screen. And the other thing is we do still have traditional buttons and knobs. So we have a dual encoder on the left and the right-hand side. That gives you a total of 4 knobs in the system that can be used to do most things. So for the touchscreen interface, you can minimize it if you want to. You can simply touch to activate a field and then use a knob to enter data. And then you've also got 4 dedicated buttons across the bottom of the screen for traditional things like the nearest, direct to, menu, and back. And we're going to go into all those things in a lot of detail here through the presentation. We have other things that we look at. So in terms of the touch screen itself, minimum button sizes. We don't want to make small little buttons like you might have on a smartphone, for example, for texting in an airplane. That's just not practical. So we constrain ourselves to minimum button sizes, and what that leads to is lower error rates. And we actually do studies with this. We go out and we have pilots conduct tasks, and then we go back and we look at how many times did they have to backspace and re-enter data and things like that. So we've really worked hard to try to make sure that you can efficiently use the touchscreen and get done what you want to do in a real-world environment. The consistency. So in terms of the design for consistency, we have such an extensive product line: comm radios, audio panels, glass cockpits, and so we try really hard to make sure that we're consistent across all product lines. And I want to show you just a few examples of that. In terms of how you input data, input methodology, I'm just saying how do you input the data into the system. And one example is tuning radio frequencies. So whether you're looking at a G3X Touch display or something like the GTN 750 that's shown on the left side of the screen now, you can see the keypad layout, the fonts that are used, the colors that are used. All those things are very consistent. So you have the knobs that are used on the GTN are the same knobs that are used on the G3X Touch. So very consistent look and feel. Another good example of that is your flight planning. So if I bring up the flight plan page on both the GTN and the G3X Touch, you'll see, again, very consistent in terms of the look and the feel of it. The method of entering the data also is very similar. So in fact, I've even told people if you want to get some basic knowledge about how to do flight planning on the G3X Touch, we actually have a GTN iPad application. So if you do have an iPad, you can get it for free from the Apple Store. You can download and play with it. So things like frequency entry and waypoint entry on your flight plan, those are very similar. It'll get you, some idea of what it's like on the G3X Touch. The other thing, just in terms of the graphics that we use. So here I'm showing an example of a Garmin Pilot application, the flight planning application that we have. This is the iPad example. And I'm not going to go into detail on Garmin Pilot. That's a whole nother webinar. But the home screen that I'm showing you there that shows you how to navigate to different pages within the iPad, we have a very similar graphical page navigation that's available on G3X Touch. So we use the same icons again, so whether you're using an iPad, a GTN, you're going to have a very similar look and feel. So that's kind of the basics of the philosophy. Another thing that I want to cover up front is just the primary flight display setup. So we do have a number of different options for the ways that we display data on the system. And then starting with the more common glass cockpit display, where you have your airspeed indicator, the tape on the left-hand side of the display, your altitude on the right-hand side, the eye at the bottom there. But we also have the ability to show a traditional six-pack arrangement. And so if you're either transitioning in to a glass panel, or if you're just more comfortable with this type of a layout, we have that option available for you on our 10.6-inch G3X Touch display. And even if you want to kind of simplify it to avoid maybe distractions of extra bells and whistles on the screen, you can turn synthetic vision off like this example. And so I don't want to get too much into the display setup part of this. We've got a lot of other things that are more commonly used through the flight. So moving on. In terms of the displays, I do want to just highlight real quick, we have our 10.6-inch display. The models are the GDU 460 or a GDU 465. And the only difference between these two models is the Sirius XM capability. One of them has a Sirius XM receiver built into it. We also have a 7-inch landscape model. Those are GDU 450 and GDU 455. Similar situation, we have the option for Sirius XM to be built in. So that's something that you would decide up front when you're designing your system. We're going to focus on the 10.6-inch display for this presentation. The user interface is very, very similar on the 7-inch. There are some variations, but just for simplicity's sake, for this presentation, we're going to focus on the larger screen display. Okay, so the first one here, we're just going to try to walk you through the basic layout of controls, things you kind of need fundamentally to know how to use the system. Starting with that upper right-hand corner, and you'll notice we have a little button there that's called split. Pressing that split button simply splits it into a primary flight display on one side and what we would call a multifunction display, or an MFD, on the right-hand side. And the multifunction display, of course, can be set up to show different types of information. Now, if you look in that upper right-hand corner again, it changes into a full button. Touching that button does exactly what you expect, takes it back into our full screen presentation. So hopefully pretty straightforward there. The next thing, just walking across the bottom here, we've got on the left-hand knob, again, that's a dual encoder, so there's two functions there. The inner knob for that is going to typically be your heading bug, so it'd be a dedicated knob for that functionality. The outer knob, the larger knob on that left-hand side, is typically going to be your altitude preselector. So those are always available to you. But in addition to having the knob, since it's a touchscreen, we also have the heading field and the altitude preselector field that you can touch, and you can change those fields through the touchscreen display if you like. So for an example, we're just going to touch the heading field, and there's where you can use your keypad, or you can use the encoder if you want. Pretty straightforward. I prefer using the knob for that particular function. On the right-hand side, in this particular case, it's going to be the inner knob actually does not have a function on this particular setup, and the outer knob is going to adjust your baro setting. I will show you just above that right-hand knob, if you can see in kind of small print there, it'll say baro. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to try to remember to point you back to that. Those knobs do get labeled what function they are no matter where you're at throughout the system. When you get familiar, you're not going to really need those references, but they are there. So again, the baro setting can also be a touch field. Touch that baro setting, and you can manually use the touchpad, or you can use the knob to enter that data. And you'll notice we also have a set for field elevation button available. Okay, next up, I'm going to go through the buttons across the bottom of the screen. The first one being that nearest button there. And at any time in the system, if you press that nearest button, by default, it's going to take you to a nearest airport page. So quick and easy access. If you're trying to go direct to somewhere, you might want to go to this page. Or if you're just trying to find information, you'll notice in that list there's frequency information, there's bearing and distance information. So a very handy menu to go to. There's also additional pages that you can select, nearest weather information, nearest VOR, NDB, and so on, that can be accessed quickly there. The next button, the Direct To key. Most people are familiar with Direct To navigation. Pressing the Direct To button is going to nominate a waypoint for you to navigate to. And typically that waypoint is going to either be something close by or it's going to be something that you've highlighted in the system. So in this case, it's actually going to nominate KDLS. And you'll notice in that menu there for Direct To, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a Direct To Activate button. That's all you got to do. If you want to draw just a magenta line from your current location to somewhere, you just hit Direct To and then Direct To Activate. The next button is the Menu button, and it has multiple functions depending on which screen you're on. So in this example, I'm in a full screen presentation on my primary flight display. So if I press the Menu button, it's going to bring up primary flight display options, PFD options. So here you can change things like your flight plan source. The flight plan source in this case is set to internal. And what that's telling you is that it's going to navigate based on the GPS that's built into the G3X display. If I toggle that to my external source, I could be listening to something like a GTN, a GNS 430W, an SL30, any of those products that might be wired in and configured to talk to the G3X system. If you don't have one of those external navigators configured, then this option won't be available. It'll always be using G3X internal GPS navigation. The next menu below that, you'll see the Inset Windows section. So this gives you the option to set up different types of information on your full screen. I'm going to talk more about the inset windows in a minute, but you can set up an inset map, an inset traffic window. You can set it up to be a G meter. If you have a video input tied to the display, you can set it up to be a video input. You get a lot of options there. You have two bearing pointers that you can overlay on top of your HSI, so you can set those up to different options, whether it's things like GPS bearing pointer and nearest airport. You'll have a timer. If you do use a timer, you can get access to it here. The minimums window there where it says set, we're going to talk more about that later in an example. And then there are some more setup type options that are available under more options. Those are not things that you're frequently going to change. We keep the menu shallow for things that are frequently used. If it's something that's more of a setup once type of an item, it may be a little deeper down. The other option, and this is the one that I constantly use for the G3X Touch, is that HSI window there. That actually works as a shortcut key to get to this PFD options menu. So if you touch that, it'll also bring you quick access to here. Okay, so moving now, we're in the split screen mode. We're on that moving map page at this point. In this particular example, the menu key is going to give you moving map options. So if I press that button, it's going to bring up different overlays, things like your terrain or topo. You can turn weather on and off. You can animate your weather, traffic, all these different options you can have displayed over top of your moving map. And then we're going to go through some other examples like the graphically editing of a flight plan further down in the presentation here. If at any time in the system you press the menu key twice, it's actually going to take you on to what we call our main menu. And the main menu, again, is things that you're not going to use typically throughout the flight frequently. Weight and balance, your flight plan catalog. You can see some of the things on the list here. These are more setup type things usually, so but you can get to it quickly by just pressing menu. And last, the dedicated back button. So if you ever make a mistake in the system or you want to make one step back, you just hit that dedicated back key. If you ever get down into a menu and you just want to be able to get back to the home screen, you kind of want to we said click your heels and go home, but you're going to just hit that back key, press and hold it, and it'll take you out to your default page. So in this example, pressing and holding that back key down will take you all the way back to the full screen presentation. And last thing we get talked to, just in terms of a high-level overview, the SD card. So there is a standard SD card in the display. We want people to use a SanDisk SD card specifically, and it's got to be 8 gigabytes or less. And that thing is going to be used for software updates. You can get those free from our website. You can use a tool that we have to do electronic checklists through our system. You can data log, so if you want to record all of your engine data, flight data, all that can be streamed to the SD card, and you can take it in an easy-to-read format, use it for online programs or in a spreadsheet. And then you're going to be able to use your SD card as well to do your database updates. So all of your databases are going to be managed through our flygarmin.com website. We have some really good options, cheap options for especially the US market that you can go download from our website. Okay, next option here we're going to talk about is all the touch fields on the screen. So I thought it might be helpful just to highlight the red outline. So all those different areas on the screen, and this is a pretty fully loaded setup. I'm using a kiosk here that has 2 Comm radios, so you'll see Comm 1 and Comm 2 on the top of the screen. You've got audio controls for a complete audio panel integration, transponder controls. You've got your engine strip. You've got things like Autopilot integration. So there's a lot of different areas on the screen. We're gonna touch on, no pun intended, we're gonna touch on most of these throughout the presentation. So some shortcuts again. We talked about it a little bit, but I want to highlight again because these are pretty neat. So the first thing is that dedicated engine strip. If you touch anywhere inside that red box there, it'll jump you into a split screen mode and it'll take you to the engine page. And so that's where you'd see things like lean assist and your fuel calculator. We'll go through some examples of that later. Once you get into that split screen mode, of course, you can get back out of it by touching the full button in the upper right hand corner, or you can hit that back key down in the bottom corner, or you can just touch the EIS or the engine strip again, and it'll take you right back into your full screen presentation. So nice to be able to get quick and easy access to additional engine information that way. The next one would be that inset window on the left-hand side. Again, keep in mind that you can change these inset windows, so they're kind of a configurable shortcut key. In this example, it's a map, so it's going to jump me to the map page. Again, going back to the full screen mode, either the full screen button or the back button. And then that HSI, so in the middle of the screen, no matter what's going on, you can touch that HSI and it'll give you quick and easy access to that PFD options menu. And full and back, take me back to my full screen. On the right hand side, a second inset window in this example set up for the active flight plan. So touch that button there, it's going to jump you to that active flight plan page. Okay, we're going to go back to full screen. And we're going to move on. So in terms of page navigation, I want to highlight a couple different methods that you can use to get to those different multifunction windows throughout the G3X system. So the first thing is we're going to go back into our split screen mode. So in that upper right hand corner, split screen button, we're going to touch that. The map page is going to by default be on the far left side. And what I'm highlighting there in the red box is what we call our page navigation bar. To the left of the page navigation bar, you're going to see the title of the page that you're currently on and the little icon, so you see the map page there. And you also see map with the cyan background, and that tells you that's the page you have selected. Now to change pages, you've got two different options. Number one, you can simply touch the page navigation bar. So simply touch inside that field there. And it'll bring up the graphical page navigation. So this, you select the icon that you want to go to. I think in this example I had it set up to go to our charts page. So I touch the charts button and it takes you to the charts page. The charts page is where we show our paper charts, our en route charts for VFR or IFR. The other option you have, again, is that the knob. Most of the functions in the system can be accomplished with either the dedicated buttons and knobs at the bottom of the screen. If you look at the labeling there, The inner knob in that bottom right-hand corner is going to zoom in and out on this chart page. The outer knob is going to select page. So you can simply turn the outer knob to scroll to different types of information. I think in this example, we scroll one notch to the right, and now I'm on my waypoint page. This particular page is extremely handy. You'll see on the right-hand side you've got different tabs of information. So by default, it brings up general information about that waypoint that's selected at the top. You can change the waypoint that's entered there just by touching that field and entering a different waypoint identifier. You can tab down to frequency information, runway information, weather information, AOPA directory, and then that bottom tab on the right-hand side is where we say TERPs. That's our terminal procedures. So if you want to see an airport diagram or you want to see an approach plate, that's where you'd go. So then again, highlighting where we have the bottom right-hand knob labeled, the inner knob says select tab. So I can actually, again, use that knob to scroll down that list of tabbed information there. I can also, again, use the touch screen to tab through it. The next page over is our flight plan page. And we are going to circle back and come through an example of flight planning, but this is telling me what waypoints I have queued up for navigation. The weather page, kind of similar to the waypoint page where you've got multiple tabs along that right-hand side and you can pull up different types of information. So I'm by default on a NEXRAD radar overlay. I've got, one of the handy ones is winds aloft, so you can go to winds aloft and select different altitudes to see what the favorable wind conditions might be. Might want to adjust your altitude to get a tailwind, and that sort of a thing. We do have a dedicated terrain page, so you can come here to get kind of an idea of what terrain is in your general area. Of course, you're going to have a similar situational awareness just from the synthetic vision on your primary flight display, but this gives you a plan view of the terrain, and it also gives you a little profile view across the bottom of the screen. So what that profile view is showing you is based on your current flight path, what the slice of terrain looks like in front of you. So you can get an idea of what the peaks might be that you're going to encounter. Scrolling again over to the traffic page. So traffic gets overlaid onto your primary flight display in 3 dimensions. It also gets overlaid onto your moving map, but we have an end in the inset window, but we also have a dedicated traffic page. So this is nice to have so you can adjust your range, and typically you don't see traffic until they're pretty much within a 2 nautical mile radius or so. But one of the nice features of the system is now that we have the ADS-B traffic information, we know a lot more about the trend of the airplane. And so when we show the traffic targets with that little green vector coming off of it, it's actually showing you relative motion. So it gives you a much better idea of what your closure rates are with different aircraft, lets you figure out which ones are the real threat. So I won't talk too much about it, but the traffic is absolutely fantastic in terms of situational awareness, just knowing which ones are more of a threat. The system also does automatically enunciate things if the traffic looks like it's going to cross your path, but the target trend vectors that we show on both the traffic page and on the moving map page are really handy references. So that's some of the basics, page navigation. I guess if I step back one, you'll see some additional pages that I didn't talk about there. You do have the option of hooking up a video input. You can pull up a page for that, but there's not a lot of user interface explanation there. It's just another page you can select. Okay, so we've kind of covered some of the basic controls in terms of getting around the system. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'm glad they're recording this. If something gets missed, we can always come back and rewatch. But now we're going to move on to some of the flight planning examples. So skip over here. So you'll notice my inset window for the active flight plan currently has nothing in it. We're going to go about changing that. So the first example is a simple direct to. So for a lot of people, this is 75, 80 or more percent of the time, they're going to just do a simple direct to. So again, going back to split screen mode, and on your moving map page, one of the easy ways to do a direct to is highlight where you want to go. So I can actually go over to the touch screen, and in this example, I've got a little red circle there around KTTD, that's Portland Troutdale. and I'm going to touch the screen, and it's going to highlight that airport for me. It tells me it's Portland Troutdale, 39 feet MSL. At the bottom of the screen there, you'll notice that TTD is highlighted. It gives me my, again, my latitude, longitude, gives me the height of that particular waypoint. The little green triangle that's next to KTTD allows me to scroll to different types of information that's in that geographic area. So if I scroll across, I'll actually get things like airspace, restricted areas, other types of information. But I touched the Portland Troutdale Airport, so it highlights that one there for me. There's the identifier. I know I've got the right one. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the direct to key. The system nominates Portland Troutdale. All I have to do at that point is hit direct to activate, and it draws my magenta line for me. I'm off and running. So pretty simple. You will notice that I drew a line right through some rain, some kind of storm mix, wintry mix, something's going on there. So this is a good opportunity to demonstrate the graphical flight plan, how that might be used in the real world. Some people call it rubber banding the flight plan. It's been around for a while on Garmin portable products, but you do have the ability to do that here. So from your moving map page, what you're going to do is you're going to press the menu key, go back to that map options menu that we talked about before, and then the graphical flight plan options right there, graphically edit flight plan. Once you hit that button, at the top of the screen it says select point to append or grab the leg to edit, essentially. So I can add waypoints to the end of my flight plan just by touching different points on the screen graphically. Or in this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab onto the currently active leg where I've got that circle there, and I'm going to drag it over around that storm. So I can drop that onto an existing waypoint that's in the G3X system, or if I drop it in a point in space like I've done here, it gives me the option to create a user waypoint out there. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. I'm going to hit the Create User Waypoint button. It comes up with a nominated name for the user waypoint. It's user waypoint 16, something generic. You can customize that if you want. I can name it Brian's waypoint, whatever you want to do there. And this one, I'm just going to go ahead and accept the default. I'm going to hit Enter. And there it shows me a preview of my graphically edited flight plan. It's taken me nicely around that little cell there. And at this point, all I've got to do is hit that little green check save box there. And now my flight plan's updated. So that's just a simple example how you can use that graphical flight planning tool. I am going to talk a little bit more about the direct to menu. There's a lot of neat things that you can do from this, and since we have a dedicated button for it, it gives you nice quick access. So just looking across the top there, again, you're going to see tab type information, and that's used throughout the system. So you can use your enter knob control, or you can use the touch screen to just go to those different tabs. I'm going to go over to the nearest airport tab. So I may want to find somewhere close to get down, or maybe I want to go pull up information about one of my flight plan waypoints. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select 4 Sierra 2. And then it brings me up with bearing information. I think I've got it highlighted here. There's the waypoint that I've selected. If that's not the waypoint that you like I said before, all these fields you can touch and you can change what's in there, and you can get information about a different waypoint. That box there is pretty handy if you need to quickly tell Tower where you're at, direct to, just simply highlight which waypoints you want to do in reference to. You can give them your bearing and distance quick and easy. There's even a little course to box there inside that you can change your inbound course to that waypoint if you want to. And then there's an info button. So the info button takes you to a tabbed menu very similar to that waypoint information page. So you can kind of see how quickly you can gain access to these different waypoints using, there's lots of different ways to do it. So building a flight plan on the flight plan page. So if you're doing a little bit more complex flight planning, this might be the route that you end up going. I'm starting with an empty flight plan, and I'm on that flight plan page. So again, look at that page navigation bar on the active flight plan page. And if I simply touch where it says add waypoint, It's going to bring up that waypoint identifier menu, and I can use the keypad. I can use the fast find function. In this case, I'm going to use fast find as an example. That little magnifying glass, we call that fast find because what it does for you, it uses the power of the database, so you don't have to type in the full waypoint identifier. All you got to do is hit the find, and it'll pull up a list of recently used waypoints, and then you've got, again, the tabbed information that you can touch or scroll through. In this case, I'm going to go to my nearest waypoints tab and look down through there and see if something, if I've got the waypoint that I want to go to. So in this example, I want to go to Cascade Lock State. It's right there in my menu. I touch that button there, and it loads it into my flight plan. This is pretty straightforward. The next thing you can do, you can just continue to build the flight plan from there. So if I want to add a waypoint to the end, just touch that Add Waypoint field. I've already got my waypoint in there. Again, you can use the keypad if you prefer, and you've got an alphanumeric keypad there, pretty easy to use. You've also got the option of using that knob in the bottom right-hand corner. So if you want to use the knob, the inner knob actually will change the character for the waypoint identifier, and the outer knob will change the cursor position. So you use the inner knob to select the character, the outer knob to adjust the cursor over one, and then you go on. So if you've used any of the other panel mount Garmin products, this should be very familiar for you. And once you've got that waypoint identifier in there, again, you just hit the enter key, and it adds it to your flight plan. The other thing you might run into is you start building your flight plan and maybe you forgot to do something. So I actually did that when I was building this presentation, and I said, oh, well, I really meant to enter my departure airport. So how do I do that? So all you have to do if you want to insert a waypoint is you're going to touch one of the waypoints that's already in your flight plan. In this case, I want to put it at the beginning. So I'm going to touch that Cascade Lock State waypoint. And then it gives me the option to, again, pull up waypoint information. But what I'm really after is I want to insert a waypoint into my flight plan before. So I'm going to select Insert Before. Again, enter your waypoint identifier. Hit Enter. And now it adds KDLS, my departure waypoint, into the flight plan before there. So pretty straightforward. Another thing, I don't have a screenshot to show here, but right now the way the flight planning is working, I'm doing direct to navigation over to Cascade Lock State. If you want to activate a different leg of the flight plan, so let's say I want to activate the leg from Cascade Lock State to the Portland Troutdale Airport, to my destination, I can manually do that by touching Portland Troutdale and selecting Activate that leg of the flight plan, and then it'll draw a line from Cascade Lock State to Portland Troutdale. The other thing I'll highlight on the active flight plan page, you do have some data fields up there on the top. So there's some defaults, but all you have to do if you want different types of information is touch one of those buttons, and then you get a full menu selection. You might want to have your estimated time of arrival up there, but you have a lot of different options. You can configure that how you like it. And the flight plan source, again, so important to keep in mind, especially if you have an external navigator wired up and configured for the system, you need to remember this switch so it doesn't get you confused in terms of whether you're listening to the G3X GPS or whether you're listening to some kind of an external flight plan source. So if you touch that button, it brings up the selection. Now I can touch external GPS, and again, I can also touch the HSI and quickly get to that same information, toggle it from internal to external. Okay, here's yet another option. So many different options for flight planning. We have our Garmin Pilot application. We're also compatible with the ForeFlight application. And you can do your flight planning at home. You can, the Garmin Pilot application is really a fantastic tool. If you're connected to Wi-Fi, you can get weather information. You can plan out all your routes. Very handy when you're sitting at home. You can walk up to the airplane, and I'm going to show you where the flight plan page is there. I'm going to select the flight plan page. I've already got something from Olathe to Hayes here in Kansas, and we're going to go ahead and send that over to the G3X Touch without having to enter it again on the G3X Touch. So all you do from that flight plan page on the Garmin Pilot application, there's a little button. That little button we call a Connect icon, and If you touch that little icon, it brings up a menu that says Flight Plan Transfer, and then do you want to send it to, or do you want to load the flight plan from your panel? So pretty straightforward. I want to send it to my panel, so I'm going to tap that button, and you'll notice on the G3X side, it pops up and says plan received, KIXD to KHYS. And do you want to ignore that flight plan? Do you want to store it or activate it? If I ignore it, nothing happens. We go on with whatever I was currently doing with the G3X. If I store it, it's going to put it into my flight plan catalog so I can grab it later if I want to. And then, of course, if I go ahead and activate it, it's going to add it into my active flight plan. So that's just one way you can use the wireless technology. This is a Bluetooth connection. It's all standard as part of the G3X Touch system. The other cool thing that you can do is you can have your Garmin Pilot application or other Garmin Bluetooth portable products like the Era 660 or the Era 796. You can have them automatically sync to the flight plan information. So no matter where you're making the change, the other application can automatically update. Okay, so those were some of the flight planning basics. We're going to move on to how we use tune our frequencies and control the radios with the G3X Touch. So the first thing I'll highlight up at the top, we have the ability to integrate up to 2 Comm radios into the top of the G3X Touch display there. And basically, the simplest way to put it, anything that has a radio in it that Garmin currently sells, we can do this with. So if you buy one of our products that's currently in production, you'll be able to do this type of integration. I put a little legend together just to kind of explain the different color codes for you. The standby frequency fields, those are the cyan fields. The second item there, the active frequency, if you have an active frequency for the Comm radio and you also have an active mic, so your mic's hot, that's the one you're going to be communicating on, that's the green one. So in this case, Comm 1 has the active mic. And then the last one there, if you have it, it's the active frequency for a Comm radio, in this case Comm 2, but it's not currently the active mic, then it's in white. So if I want to change a frequency, one of the easiest things to remember is just touch what you want to change. You want to tune the standby. So, and this is another opportunity to kind of remind, if you're not familiar with using these touchscreen avionics in the airplane, I'd highly recommend resting your fingers on the top of the display for this type of action. So rest 4 fingers on top and just tap the standby frequency field with your thumb. And that makes it real easy to get this menu up, and then you can kind of slide your hand back and forth to do different entries. And in this example, I think the first one I had, of course, you're going to have the keypad that you can use, the numeric keypad. You do have the knob, the ability to tune it with the knob down there. You're going to have the outer knob for the big numbers, the little knob for the smaller numbers. But we're going to use Fast Find, again, for the example, because it's the quickest and easiest way to do it. The Find button brings up another tabbed menu like this. So recent frequencies come up first. We've got other tabs for things like flight plan frequencies. If you want to create your own user frequencies, you can name them whatever you want. Maybe one you talk to a friend on while you're flying around, you can configure that. We're going to go over to the flight plan list. So in this case, my destination is KDLS. I want to get some frequency information there. And it has multiple frequencies. So the menu has select frequency. Touch that button, and it brings up a list of frequencies. And typically, you're far enough out, you might want to, maybe you want to listen in on the Unicom. So I'm going to tune the Unicom. And then you'll notice that now in my Comm 1 standby field, 123.0 is tuned. And it actually decodes that for you. It says KDLS Unicom. So you know you've got the right frequency. And again, if you want to make it the active frequency, just remember to touch what you want to change. If you want to change the active frequency, touch the active frequency field, and it'll slide that frequency over there for you. It actually does a really nice animation, but I can't simulate it in this this type of format. So, but I did the best I could there. The next one we're going to show as an example. We're going to tune another standby. We're going to do the Comm 1 standby again. Again, remembering, and I'm probably going to beat a dead horse here, but you can always use the keypad or the knob for all these data entry. And in this case, I'm going to hit the fast find again. I just want to kind of show you something. The system does try to be smart about giving you quick access to the information you're after. The last time we were in here, we selected the flight plan tab, so it left it on the flight plan tab for the next time you come back to grab information. So again, don't have to touch that there. I'm going to pull up some more frequency information about KDLS, and I may want to tune in center frequency. Maybe I want to pick up flight following. So it tunes it in there, it gives me the frequency decoded. Pretty simple. Again, in the standby frequency field, we have other things we can do. We do have the ability to turn on the standby monitoring. So if you want to be able to listen to your standby frequency when you're not receiving on the active frequency, you can toggle that on and off. You just press that button there, and then you'll notice a little monitor icon in the standby frequency field up there at the top to let you know that that's actually turned on after you get back out of the screen. Some of our comm radios you can also adjust the volume and do other things, but that's the basics of it. The next one I want to go through is the transponder controls. These are less frequently used, pretty simple, but right there at the top of the screen you've got a transponder field. If you want to change the transponder code or you want to change the transponder mode, you just touch that button. And first thing to point out, the mode selection. So the system is smart enough to actually do all the mode selection for you. It'll automatically transition from ground into on mode based on your GPS speed, based on airspeed and all those things. So you don't typically have to change the mode, but they are there, the controls are there for you. The ident button is on that transponder menu, but there's also a dedicated ident button that's always available at the top of the screen. So no matter what you're doing at the system, you're going to have quick access to that if you need to ident, or maybe you have an external switch wired into the transponder, and then you can do it from your control stick. You do have a back button that'll take you back out of the transponder menu. The back button at the bottom will also do that. If you go back to full screen mode, it'll also take you out. The other way, most of the fields, if you touch the transponder field and touch it again, it's an open and close action. So press it once, it brings up the transponder menu. You press it again, and it closes the transponder menu. So we have a VFR button there that'll quickly tune 1200 for you, so you don't have to type it in. So if you just need a squawk VFR, but if you get assigned a transponder code for flight following or whatever you're doing, then you can use the keypad. Or again, broken record here, but you can set the code using that knob in the bottom right-hand corner. The backspace, so if you make a mistake when you're typing that in, you can always use the backspace just to correct your error. And then once you're ready to do it, you can hit enter, and that's going to change your transponder code for you. And again, highlighting that we've got a full screen presentation, but you don't lose access to the ident button. So if you just need to quickly reach up and ident, that's why it's there. Okay, transponder controls behind us. We're going to move on to audio controls. And before we get deep into that, I want to explain the products a little bit here. On the top of the screen, we're showing the GTR 200. That's our two-place stereo intercom. It's a comm radio, 10-watt comm radio. It does have a dedicated music input and a lot of other cool features. And that can be fully integrated into the G3X Touch. We also have a completely remote mount version of that, a GTR 20, very similar, and I'm going to demonstrate the differences there. The one below that in the middle is our new GMA 245 audio panel. That also integrates very well with the G3X Touch. That's a full audio panel. It's actually a 6-place audio panel. Has other advanced features like the Bluetooth connectivity. We're going to run through all the controls for that one. And then the last one, the bottom of the screen there is our GMA 245R. I'm going to try to give you an overview of the differences between all these. So the first one up, the GTR 20 and the GTR 200 interfaces. So the first thing I'll point out is we do have that audio button right there at the top of the screen. So if you want to adjust your audio, all you have to do, touch that button, and it brings up a menu there on the right side of the screen. So here's where you turn things like Pilot Isolate on and off. So if you have a noisy passenger and you want to just be able to focus on what you're doing, turn on Pilot Isolate. And then you'll notice that up in that audio button, it'll tell you that Isolate is on. That way, if you close out of this audio menu, you'll still have an indicator an easy reference to know that you've got Pilot Isolate on. The Pilot, the intercom volume there, that'll adjust the intercom volume through the touch screen. You've got a dedicated music input. You can toggle that on and off from this menu, and then of course you can adjust the music volume. And then one of the coolest things, the music effects. So it is a stereo intercom, a stereo input for the music, and it has the ability to turn up things like bass boost and set equalizer effects for rock, pop, or classical, so it can really make your audio quality sound nice through your headset. And then the more options menu there. That's going to bring up things like the 3D audio function, and it also adjusts your muting behavior. So whether or not you want the music to be muted when the comm radio, when the radio actually is receiving, those types of settings would be adjusted through here. Most people don't turn on the comm muting the intercom. That's the first selection. A lot of times we do want to have the ability to mute the music when we receive a radio transmission so we don't miss it. But those are the types of settings that you're going to have in here. And then at the bottom, I guess I'll mention, it does have built-in auto squelch that works very well. So most people just run with the auto squelch, but you can turn that off and do some manual squelch adjustment. Moving on from the GTR series, I'm going to talk about the GMA 245 and the 245R. Before I get too far into the integration with G3X Touch, almost everything on the G3X Touch is the same, whether you get a panel mount audio panel or you do the completely remote mount audio panel. There are a few subtle differences. I'm going to point those out as we go along, but if I don't say anything, just assume that the feature or the integration is both for the panel mount and for the remote mount audio panel. So again, we have that audio button right there at the top, very similar to what I just showed you with the GTR radios. That brings up the audio/intercom menu that you see on the right-hand side. And the first tab that comes across, so we have radio, intercom, phone and media, and music input tabs. The radios tab is really mimicking a lot of the panel mount controls. So I'm highlighting on the GMA 245 there at the top where you have Comm 1, Comm 2 selection for mic and your headphones. And we're just mimicking that on the touch screen, both in the buttons in the top there, so where you see those little triangles. Pretty handy. You can toggle between mic 1 and mic 2 just by touching that button. And if you want to turn on the standby monitoring function and you want to listen to the other, you can do that too right from the button there. We also have the same controls on that dedicated radios tab, so if you pull up the menu, you can adjust those things from here. I would say the split comm button, if you see the split comm button there, not very common for our type of aircraft, but if you ever have somebody that wants to have a pilot and a co-pilot using two radios simultaneously, the audio panel does have the ability to do that. Reach out to us and talk to us about it a little bit. There's some installation changes there, but it does have that possibility. The next thing, I'll just point out some of the additional options. We do have 3 auxiliary inputs that you can connect up in the 245. So if you have some kind of extra audio that you want to be able to plumb in, you can do that through these auxiliary sources. And then that active comm receive field is going to determine whether or not the frequency that you're monitoring gets muted every time you get your active radio broadcast coming in. Okay. Next thing I'm highlighting up there on the GMA 245, we do have a dedicated play button. So that's, we call it a clearance recorder. What the audio panel is doing, it records the last 60 seconds of audio for you. And if at any time you may miss a radio call or you may just want to make sure you didn't hear it wrong, you can press that play button once and it'll play the last audio clip. If you keep pressing it, it'll skip back through previous audio clips. And again, on the G3X Touch, we've just mimicked that control, so you have the ability to do that right from that radios tab. We also have the nav audio buttons, of course, on the GMA 245, and we've integrated that into the G3X Touch, so those are just toggle on and off. We have a speaker button, so if you do want to have a speaker for maybe listening to weather before you start the engine up in the aircraft or something, we do have an input for a speaker. Or an output for a speaker, and we also have the same button available on the G3X Touch. So You can change that in either place, on and off. And now we're going to move over to the intercom tab. So in this specific example, this is one of the differences between the panel mount and the remote mount. So I want to highlight the intercom volume for the panel mount radio is actually a dedicated knob. So that inner knob on the left-hand side adjusts the intercom volume for the pilot. The inner knob on the right-hand side adjusts the intercom volume for the co-pilot and passenger positions in the aircraft. So we don't have controls for those on the G3X Touch. We don't want to have the panel mount control and the G3X Touch control fighting each other. So we didn't include those if you configure a GMA 245. If you go to the GMA 245R, now we've got to integrate those intercom volume controls right onto the G3X Touch. So now you can independently control volume for pilot, co-pilot, and passenger positions through the touchscreen interface. Under your More Options tab, you're going to see things like, again, that 3D audio features and adjusting those muting settings that I was talking about before. Over to the Phone and Media tab. So this is where the Bluetooth part of the equation comes in. So you'll be able to connect your smart device, whether it's a phone or a tablet. If it has a Bluetooth connectivity, you can connect it up directly to the audio panel, and you can use it like a media player. So now I can have streaming music that I can start and stop playing. I can skip forward and back tracks right from my G3X Touch display. Never have to take the phone out of the pocket. The menu below it, that's where you'd actually come to pair up your device. So if you hit that pair device button, you can Bluetooth pair directly to the audio panel. In this case, I've got my iPhone paired to it. It tells me my phone's signal strength. It shows me my battery status. It's telling me that I have telephone capability and media capability. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that telephone audio button. I don't currently have the telephone audio now, so if I tried to talk to somebody, I wouldn't hear anything. But taking the example one step forward, let's say you have an incoming call. So here at the top of that window, you'll see incoming call. You'll see the number or the caller ID of the person that's calling you. You've got the ability to adjust your call volume. You can ignore the call, or you can answer the call right from the display. If you're not on the audio and intercom page, so you might be in a full screen display setup, how do you know you have a phone call? In that audio button, you'll notice that little blue TEL indication. So the idea here is if you don't have your telephone audio turned on, you may be busy flying the airplane, you may be low enough that somebody can call your cell phone, and you really don't want to have a lot of distractions. So it's just a subtle indication to you that a telephone call is coming in. Of course, you as the pilot have to decide whether or not you're gonna divert yourself to dealing with that, but you do have that indication there. And then if I go ahead and I answer the call, I think the next slide here, I've got my telephone audio turned on now. I can see my call active. If I want to hang up on the person, I can do that right from the touchscreen. So you never have to take your phone out of your pocket. Just a really cool feature with that Bluetooth connectivity. Skipping now over to that music input tab. So here again, we've got the music source, and we can control the media player through that phone and media tab, but this is where we control our music distribution and our music effects. So by default, it's set up for normal distribution, and what that means is I'm going to highlight that normal distribution field right there. If you look at the music, you can turn the music on and off, and you can select a music source. So you may, from the touchscreen interface, you can select Bluetooth, you can select Music 1, Music 2, you've got up to 3 different options there that you can pick from. This works very similarly to the panel mount controls on the GMA 245 that I'm highlighting. So that little music symbol with the SEL button, that cycles between the 3 different music sources, Music 1, Music 2, and Bluetooth audio. So in this particular setup, everybody in the airplane is going to hear the exact same thing. Now if I change the distribution mode, I'm sorry, before I get onto that, the music effects. So just like I showed you with the GTR20, you're going to have the ability to set that up. Music, the bass boost, you're going to have the ability to set up an equalizer for all the different audio sources. In this case, I've got Music 1, I've got Sirius XM plumbed in, and I've got my Bluetooth audio. If I change over to the advanced audio distribution, now you'll notice I've got menus for pilot, co-pilot, and passenger music. So every position in the aircraft can choose their own music source independently. So this is where the touchscreen really helps you. Before I go on to that next slide, We do have the ability to adjust the passenger music volume from the touchscreen, but at the top, with the GMA 245, that big outer knob on the left side and the right side adjusts pilot and co-pilot volume. So you've got dedicated knobs for that. That's why we didn't include them on the touchscreen. But if you go over to the GMA 245R, the remote mount version has volume controls for each individual position right through the touchscreen. So you have absolute control over what everybody hears and the volume levels with this setup. That's the audio controls. We're going to move on here and try to keep going so there's time to answer questions at the end. In terms of the autopilot controls, first thing I'll highlight, right there at the top of the G3X Touch display, there's an autopilot status bar. It's empty right now because the autopilot's turned off. There's nothing going on. If I touch that field, it's going to bring up my autopilot control system. So now this is where I can turn on and off the different types of modes. On the top row, those are things you turn on and off. The second row is lateral autopilot modes. The bottom row are your vertical autopilot modes. Don't forget that we have options for dedicated autopilot controls. We have the GMC 305 and the GMC 307. So either one of those are great options. It's a much more efficient user interface and gives you some redundancy. But for the presentation here, we're going to focus on the touchscreen controls for simplicity, basically, to tell you how this is kind of set up. So I've got a legend on the right-hand side there just to give you a high-level understanding of the mode, what the different colors means. So again, green means active. So throughout the system, green means active. The armed modes are displayed in white. And you'll see what I mean in a minute when I go through some of the examples. We do have a full flight director for the system. Those flight director bars will come on automatically with the autopilot. And if the autopilot, if the flight director bars are solid, that tells you that the autopilot's on. If they're hollow, the autopilot's off, but the flight director's still running. So you can actually turn your flight director on and hand fly your airplane using the flight director bars if you'd like to do that. So moving back over, we're just going to do something simple. We're just going to turn on the autopilot initially. So that AP button that I'm highlighting turns the autopilot on. And in the autopilot status bar, you're going to see on the left-hand side, AP in green, so autopilot's active. The default mode for your roll axis is roll mode. So you're typically going to end up wings level. The pitch mode holds whatever pitch. So if you are climbing out and you hit AP on, it's going to automatically hold wings level, and it's going to hold your current pitch angle. The flight director, like I said before, automatically comes on. So if you see those little magenta bars, you can turn those off if you want to, but they do default to on when you turn the autopilot on. So as far as the, and I guess I should have said before I move on, that altitude select, ALTS, that came on as an armed mode in this example because I had the altitude pre-selector set to 5,000 feet. So moving on, I'm going to turn on both the heading mode and the altitude mode, and then go back up to that AFCS status bar, and now you can see my lateral mode, HDG, is in heading mode, and I'm in altitude hold, and I'm currently holding 5,000 feet. So that's what the status bar is telling you. All of it's active. Now if you want to have the autopilot just chase the heading bug, you can do that. Again, you can use the knob, you can use the autopilot controller, or you can use the touchscreen interface to change the selected heading. I'm just going to spin it to the left. The autopilot's just going to chase it. We do have a simplified autopilot operating mode where it'll also simply chase the altitude bug up and down. Some customers are more familiar with that autopilot behavior, so you do have that available to you and set up, but by default I'm going to show you how we do basic climb and descent here in a minute using the vertical modes. So now I'm going to go back over and I'm actually going to turn the nav mode on, and it's pretty straightforward. It's going to go from heading to nav mode, and then the autopilot status bar there at the top, you're going to see the autopilot's on, and now I'm in GPS mode. So it's just going to follow the magenta line. Nothing complicated about it there. For the next one, I'm going to highlight that selected altitude field. So I kind of skipped a step here, but I spun the altitude pre-selector and I moved it up to 6,000 feet. So the general operation of climbing or descending using our autopilot, you're going to select the altitude you want to go to. So in this case, I'm selecting 6,000 feet, and then you're going to tell it what mode you want to use to get there. So I've highlighted indicated airspeed mode, IAS mode. That's one of your options. You can actually turn that on, and then you can set an airspeed bug and tell it what speed you want to climb at. So maybe you want to tell it to climb at VY, you can do that. Another popular option, I use vertical speed mode. For whatever reason, I seem to use that more frequently. I may just want to set it up to climb at 500 feet per minute. So I'm going to use the vertical speed for this example. I'm going to turn that mode on, and I'm going to show you there on the top the bars selected vertical speed mode. And since I moved my altitude pre-selector up to 6,000, ALTS, altitude select, is actually armed. So at this point, I've done everything I need to do. It's going to climb up and it's going to capture 6,000 feet automatically. If you want to change the vertical speed reference, there it is, 500 feet per minute, and the buttons next to it, nose up and nose down. Or if you have our dedicated autopilot controller, you can just spin that wheel up and down and it'll change that reference for you. So the next screenshot here, I'm back in the full screen mode, and in that autopilot status bar, you're going to see Alt S has gone from the armed in white mode over to the active mode, and now altitude hold mode, ALT, is the armed mode. And I'm approaching 6,000 feet. As I transition into 6,000 feet, it comes into altitude select, or excuse me, altitude hold mode, and it shows me in the status bar that it's holding 6,000 feet. So from a pilot standpoint, just remember that you have to tell it where you want to go, move your pre-selector, and then tell it how you want to get there, whether you're climbing or descending. That's basically how it works. The other option with the autopilot, I want to show the VNAV function. So if you've never programmed a vertical navigation descent, that's what VNAV stands for. You can get to it. I like to get to it through the flight plan page. So there's a button there. Press that button. And now this lets you set up your profiles. So you can tell it what waypoint you want to go to. You're referencing, in this case, that cascade lock state. The profile you want it to fly. So I told it that I want to descend at 1,000 feet per minute. You can adjust that to whatever you want. I told it that I want to be at 3,000 feet above the waypoint. I could also choose to be at a certain MSL altitude. And then I say by 3 nautical miles before or after the waypoint. You can select all those things. And then I like to turn the VNAV messages on. That way if you're flying cross country, you'll actually get a little message that reminds you that your VNAV descent's coming up. The very bottom of that menu, you'll see vertical speed required is 940 feet per minute. So I'm really close to my capture. And if you look at the vertical deviation indicator right there next to your altitude tape, you can see I'm just about to fly into that profile. So on the next screen here, I think I am going to go over to my autopilot controls. And now I can turn the VNAV mode on. So select the VNAV mode, and you'll notice that VNAV has become active. And ALTV is telling you that it's armed the mode. It's going to go down and capture that altitude that you told it to, 3 nautical miles before the waypoint. It's going to level off 3,000 feet above. So once you get it set up, it's real straightforward, and it all happens automatically for you. So going on here, we're on the vertical descent. Next thing, the level button. So you can have a dedicated switch, you can have the autopilot controller, or you can get to it from here. But if you hit that level button at any time, it's going to roll the airplane wings level, and it's going to hold 0 vertical speed. So if you ever get into an unusual attitude, a situation you don't like, or if you're just busy and you want to keep the airplane straight and level while you get something sorted out, hit that level button and it'll keep you going. The other one to talk about a little bit is the ESP function. That's the electronic stability function. And I just want to highlight real quick, on the roll indicator, there's 2 green hash marks on the left and the right-hand side. And those are telling you that ESP is on, and those are the roll limits that it's set up for. So what ESP is doing for you in the background is it monitors your pitch angle, your roll angle, and your airspeed. And it sets up an envelope around your airplane. If you ever get outside that envelope with the ESP on, it's going to use the autopilot servos to nudge you back to straight and level. So the more you get outside that envelope, the more it ramps up force to guide you back to straight and level. So it's just trying to keep you from getting into an unusual attitude. So hopefully you never get into that extreme situation. It can be kind of monitoring you. If you get busy, you could fall asleep. Who knows? ESP is there for you. If I turn ESP off, then of course those little green indicators clear. I'm going to turn it back on one more time just so you can see those green indicators come up on the roll. And again, that's your cue as the pilot. My autopilot's off, but I'm hand flying, and electronic stability protection is monitoring that envelope for me. I had a group of things here, just general cross-country type items that it didn't fit into one of the other categories that I wanted to talk about, but these are pretty common ones that you'll want to know about. So the first thing I wanted to point out was the fuel calculator. So to get to the fuel calculator, the quickest way, just touch that engine strip right there, and then you'll notice the tabs. We got main page, and then the fuel calculator page there. I'm going to tab over to fuel calculator. And what this does for you, you've got your fuel remaining there, and you want to remember to set that at the beginning of every flight. So the system will actually monitor your current fuel quantity, and if you added 50 gallons of fuel between your current flight where you ended last and your new flight, it can actually prompt you and say, hey, it looks like you added fuel. Do you need to go set your fuel totalizer? So to help the pilot remember, but it's a good habit to get into if you put it in your checklist or whatever to go reset that. The other thing you can do that's nice is you can have preset values. So if your full tanks are 42 gallons and you have maybe tabs at 21, you can set up those values. So I'm just going to hit 42 gallons. I filled it up full. And what that does for me is now my system is going to automatically calculate in the background for me what my range is. So I can lean the airplane out and I'll get these nice green fuel range rings over my map. The inner ring that's kind of dashed green and black, that one's your range to a reserve, and you tell us whether you want a 30-minute reserve or a 45-minute reserve, and then the solid green line is where we are estimating that you're going to run out of fuel. So it makes it really nice if you're cross-country and you're trying to plan your next stop. Am I going to make it with the winds I have today or not? Those fuel range rings are pretty handy. The next one I want to show you, the lean assist function. So again, I'm going to use that shortcut. I'm going to hit the engine strip. I'm going to come over here and you'll see the box under your graph for CHT and EGT that says lean assist. All you got to do is turn that on, and now as you start to lean the airplane out, it's monitoring, and it's going to try to do things like false peak detection for you. The bar graphs that are shown, or the cylinders that are shown in cyan, that's actually giving you your EGT values, and you can see small numbers over those EGT numbers, and then you've got the others that are, oh, I'm sorry, maybe I've got that backwards. That's the cylinder head temperature versus the EGT values. So it's going to highlight there. You can see the cyan filled box that's -7, and the other one that's got just a simple cyan line with a -9. So once you've determined your peak, that's going to give you a delta. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight, and I wish I would have put an indicator on here, is down in the section on the page where it says fuel, you've got a fuel flow indicator. It says GPH. And you'll notice that it put a little cyan triangle, an empty cyan triangle on there. And what that is it marks your peak fuel flow for you. And that way, if you reduce it from there, you'll know you're running lean at peak. If you increase it above that cyan marker, now you're running rich at peak. So lean assist function is pretty straightforward here. And just to review that before I move on, so you're seeing your columns there is your EGT value, and then the little bars, the white bars across that is giving you your CHT levels. So just wanted to clarify there. The other thing, pretty handy, the weather page. So again, going back to all that different tabbed information, using that en route to kind of plan your flight. There you can see which page I'm on there. We do have the option for either the subscription-free FISB weather, but we also have that SiriusXM option. A lot of times I get the question, which one's better? SiriusXM has better availability, has some products that FISB doesn't. FISB is free, so there's some trade-offs there. FISB is a little bit less available because you have to be up at altitude to get it, and the coverage isn't quite as complete. The waypoint information page, another one I reference a lot, whether I'm going to pull up information from the frequencies tab or I want to see the runway information. It'll have patterns depicted on there. I apologize, I don't have screenshots of all this, but we've covered so much information. I'm just going to keep moving along here. The next one is kind of a handy thing to have in mind is the best airport bearing pointer. So that function in combination with what we call a glide range ring is constantly running in the background. Basically, you tell us your G3X system what your best glide airspeed is and what your vertical speed is when you're flying that with the power off. So if you ever did have an engine out scenario, you want to have an idea how far you'd glide if you fly your best glide airspeed. So this is taking into account the current wind conditions, your altitude, and it's looking at all the different database waypoints that are within that ring that I'm pointing to on the map there. So it's using an algorithm and it's trying to select a best airport, and I'm going to show you an example. So in this example, I've got two different airports that are decent size and a bunch of restricted fields that are around my airport or around my airplane here. And what the algorithm does is it tries to figure out which one's the best one to go to. And I've highlighted that it's actually selected KIXD, even though it's the farthest one away from me. And there's some reasons for that. The Gardner Airport K34 there, even though it's closer, it has an east-west runway that's only, maybe 3,500 feet. KIXD has over 7,000 feet of runway, I believe. 7,000 feet that's currently lined up with my flight path. It's also looking at the wind direction. Winds are out of the north, so I can go straight into runway 36 at KIXD. So that's the general idea of what it's trying to do for you, trying to select a best airport so you have some idea where you might want to go. The other thing you can do with this feature is you can actually just hit the dedicated Direct To button and go to your nearest airports tab. And I apologize, let me go back there one real quick. You'll notice at the top of the list there is KIXD, and it says Best Glide Airport. So that's the one it's nominating for you. You can enter that as your Direct To and be off and navigating. Okay, so now we've kind of built up the tool bag a little bit. We're going to step back and we're just going to go through another real-world example, flying an instrument approach with G3X Touch combined with the GTN. Hopefully this gives you a decent idea of the buttonology involved in setting this up. So the first screen here, I've got my GTN on the right-hand side. It's the one that's driving the ship. It's the one that we're doing all the flight planning in, loading all the procedures. The G3X is listening to all that information. It's able to couple its autopilot to the approach, all the waypoint information. So the first thing, we've already loaded up our flight plan into the GTN. We're leaving Pocatello Regional, and we're going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. On the G3X side, that's highlighting the flight plan, active flight plan on the GTN. Over on the G3X side, our flight plan source, again, it's set to internal, so none of that flight plan information is coming over. As soon as I toggle that over to the external GPS, all that information is going to cross-fill over automatically. So you do your flight plan in the GTN, or you use the Garmin Pilot app and you import it into the GTN, however you want to do that, and then it just automatically fills over to your G3X Touch. My autopilot, I do need to do something there. I've got a flight plan en route, GPS based. I'm going to go ahead and turn on nav mode. So it's going to follow that magenta line for me. Next thing I'm going to do, I still have to load it in procedures. So I found out they're using runway 3. There's a quick and easy way to do that on the GTN. Just touch the waypoint on the active flight plan page where you want to load the approach. So I'm going to touch Jackson Hole. And there you can see a bunch of different options for editing your flight plan and things. But what I'm really after is that Load Procedures button right there. Hit Load Procedures, and it takes you to a Procedures page. And I want to load an approach. So touch that empty field there. And I said runway 3. I meant the LPV to runway 1. That's the one we're going to shoot today. Touch that runway there. And our initial transition is set up for vectors. So I'm expecting to fly the initial, so I'm going to go ahead and change that over, bring up the list here, and pick Zillig as my initial waypoint. At this point I have the option, so I've got Jackson Hole loaded, the approach is the LPV into runway 1, I've got my initial transition. I can either load the approach or I can load the approach and activate it. I have not been cleared for the approach yet, so I'm just going to load it. and there it's populated in my flight plan on both the GTN and the G3X Touch. So on the G3X, I'm going to skip over to a different page. I'm actually going to select my waypoint page. And again, I've got tabs of information, but what I really want is those. And you'll notice that the G3X automatically selected the approach plate for the approach that I loaded in the GTN. So it sees that flight plan information and it automatically loads it up for you. Just tries to minimize your pilot workload. If I expand that chart out, I can zoom in on it, and now I can see my minimum decision heights and all my step down altitudes. For this particular approach, my decision height is 7393, and I want to set something up so I remember to pay attention to that height. So if I go to my PFD options menu on the G3X, hit that HSI, toggle it to the minimums button here, and now I can set my minimum altitude. So I'm going 7393. I can use the keypad or I can use the knob just like any other data field. Hit that enter button. And now you'll notice you've got baro minimums right over on your primary flight display. So 7393 is right in your face and you remember your decision height. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to navigate to another page on the G3X Touch. So we bring up that menu again. I'm going to go to the map page. And I can see a nice preview of my flight plan. At this point, I've been cleared for the approach by the controller, so I'm going back over to the GTN. I'm going to touch that approach button. Simple and easy, just touch the approach, and now I can either activate the approach, activate vectors to final. I'm going to fly the whole approach through the initial fix, so just activate the approach. And now my flight plan's updated. I'm flying direct SILIG, and I don't have anything else to do at this point, except I do need to come over to the G3X and make sure my autopilot's set up to fly the approach. Since I'm flying an LPV, I'm actually going to turn the approach mode on, and then you'll notice glide path is armed in white next to the altitude hold right there at the top of the screen. So I know I've got my autopilot ready to transition right into the approach. Okay. The next thing we're going to do on the G3X Touch, we're actually going to go back to that waypoint information page, and I want to highlight the missed approach instructions here because there's another cool feature that makes your life easier if you do have to go missed. So I'm looking at my missed approach instructions that tell me to climb to 14,000, and I'm going to set my altitude preselector up to 14,000 before I have to go missed. The autopilot has now captured the glide path, so you can see your vertical deviation indicators on. You've got lateral deviation indication. And now we've started down the path. There's the vertical deviation indication. And now we're really down, getting close to our minimum. So if you look at that tape, you're going to see a little cyan bug marked where your baro minimums are set. And it's actually going to give you an audible enunciation. So if you start to get down to your minimums altitude, it's going to say minimums, minimums, and get your attention. At this point, if you've set your system up so you have a toga button, a takeoff go-around button, wired into your G3X and into your GTN, your go-around procedure is very simple. All you've got to do is hit that button, put the power on, and it's going to sequence us all the way through the missed approach procedure. So I'm going to hit the toga button in this example, and now you can see the airplane automatically, the autopilot pitches the airplane up, and we've pre-armed our altitude pre-selector to 14,000 feet. So we pour the power on, and now we're flying the missed approach. Here we are, we've sequenced all the way through, we're up at 14,000 feet, the autopilot automatically captured, you barely had to do anything, and then it sequences right into the hold, and the autopilot's just going to keep flying that racetrack for you until you get your next instructions. So hopefully this gives you a basic understanding of how the system's trying to make your life easier, especially if you're doing complex things like flying an instrument approach. That's all I had, and I apologize if I ran a little long, but do appreciate everybody that was able to participate. At this time, if anybody has any questions, I guess we're back to Tim.
Okay, Brian. Wow, that was a really great, well put together, comprehensive presentation. Thank you. We are right at our end, so with your permission and the permission of the attendees, I would like to extend the webinar for 15 minutes and go for 8:45 so we can get some questions in.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Let's go for it then. First question, Wayne's wondering, how about with the transponder settings? Does the 7500, 7600, 7700 have warnings?
You know, the system does not, if you're talking squawk codes for lost comm and those types of emergency situations, those, if you accidentally tune those, maybe he's wondering if we enunciate it somehow, and I don't believe so. So it's kind of up to pilot discretion there.
Okay. Graham's wondering, can you override the ground mode? He says a local Class C wants you to squawk mode C on the ground in the movement area.
Ooh, that's a great question, and you should be able to override the mode. And I think if you're yeah, if you have any questions about that, I know that there is the ability to override the mode, and just go into the menu there and select the mode you need it to be operating in.
Okay. Walt's wondering, what happens if the airplane can't follow the autopilot directive? For example, vertical speed can't be met at 500 feet per minute.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as part of your autopilot setup, you'll put things in there like a minimum and a maximum airspeed. So if you tell it to do something that it can't accomplish, it's going to hit a minimum airspeed, for example, and it's going to enunciate that for you, and it's not going to go below that threshold. So we're not going to stall the airplane unless you told us that the airplane can fly at 60 knots and you actually stall at 65. But the autopilot has settings for that. Likewise, if you tell it to descend at 2,000 feet per minute and you put the power full on and you've got a maximum speed, we're going to try to keep it from overspeeding the airplane as well.
Cool. Hey, by the way, that's a really sexy RVA panel there that you guys got there back at Garmin, and nice paint scheme on the plane too.
Yeah, that's a nice airplane.
Oh man, okay, so let's see here. Jack's wondering, can Comm 2 be a non-Garmin radio?
Yeah, there are some radios. For example, there are some trig radios that can do some integration. If you're familiar with the way that some of our portable products even integrated with the SL30, they could tune the standby. So I know you can integrate some of those third-party radios like trig, and you can tune the standby frequency using all the fast find functions that I was demonstrating. The limitation, I don't know if they've implemented everything so that you can flip-flop the frequencies. So you might have to reach over to their control head to flip the frequencies from standby to active. But you do get some integration there if you wire it up.
Okay. Richard's wondering, can the GTX 330 ES transponder be integrated and controlled by the G3X Touch?
It can, yes.
Okay, cool. And Rodrigo's wondering, can Jeppesen charts be viewed?
Yes, we do support Jeppesen charts, and we have worldwide charting as well. So for any of our databases, we do have support around the globe. If you want to purchase the Jeppesen charts, there is an unlock that you can get through our flygarmin.com website. You do need to unlock the feature. That's one of the few things that are not a standard feature, and then the databases are purchased through Jeppesen. Any of the other databases that you use in the system, whether it's the Garmin flight charts, things like that, those are all available through our Garmin website.
Okay, cool. Jerry's wondering, can it be set up for a two-engine airplane like an AirCam?
It's not currently set up to do twin-engine support. The request comes in fairly frequently, and we're definitely looking at it, but nothing I can promise today.
Okay. Something we're working towards. Richard's wondering, is there some sort of Garmin interface that has to be purchased separately to download a flight plan from ForeFlight to the G3X?
The ForeFlight application should work with the G3X Touch for flight planning. I've done a minimal amount of testing on my own, But ForeFlight has been we've strategically partnered with ForeFlight so they know how to interface with our Bluetooth-enabled devices. And I've done some very minimal amount of testing, and it seems to work just fine. Primarily, we focus, of course, on our own Garmin Pilot application, but ForeFlight should work.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact name of the title of the webinar, but I know this past year we did have a webinar done. We were talking about the Connext system that connects Garmin with ForeFlight.
Yeah, and to that question again, because they may be thinking of, we have a special Bluetooth adapter module called a flight stream that has to be purchased if you're just interfacing directly to a GTN. But the beauty of the G3X Touch, we've actually got that Bluetooth connectivity built into every display. So that's a standard feature. You can connect ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot directly to the display.
Nice. Jerry's wondering, can you extend the runway center lines?
There's no, you can turn them on and off. I don't think there's any way to adjust the length of them. It has to do with the zoom level on the map. If you get zoomed in enough, they'll of course be longer, but no manual adjustment that I'm aware of.
Okay. Michael's wondering, how can I get to the synthetic vision mode?
Okay, so we talked a lot about the PFD options menu touching the HSI. There is in the bottom right-hand corner of that screen, there's a More Options button. And if you go into that menu, it'll give you all kinds of options for turning synthetic vision on and off. You can turn on and off traffic, the flight path marker, the pathways functionality. All the different synthetic vision type stuffs are available through that menu. If you have trouble finding it, feel free to contact us, or it should be hopefully findable. You can find it in the pilot's guide as well. James
is wondering, can you set the G3X up for a non-published holding pattern?
So the combination of a G3X and a GTN allows you to do that. Our latest update to the GTN software will let you completely customize a holding pattern. So you can create one in space, and the G3X will listen to all that information. It'll couple the autopilot. You can change the lengths of the holding pattern. You've got a lot of control over what you do there with the combination of that and the GTN. The G3X by itself, without a GTN in a loop, does not have that capability.
Okay. Jack's wondering, how do you turn on the highway in the sky?
Yeah, so very similar to what I said for the synthetic vision options. Touch the HSI, select More Options, and then there's a selection there for turning. We call them pathways, but highway in the sky is kind of the more broad term.
Okay. Michael's saying, I live on a private airstrip, CA68. Is there a way to input the airport info, frequency pattern, directions, etc. on my G3X?
You cannot make your own. You cannot create your own waypoint information page, and I think that's what they're after there. What you can do is you can create a user waypoint. You can customize the name, the location, the icon that's associated with it. You can create user frequencies that are for your local field. You can also lobby us to add it to the database if it's something that you think that should be in there. But there's no way to set up a completely customized waypoint information page.
Okay. Richard is wondering, is there a place that will compare the features of the non-touch and the touch models of the G3X?
Oh, wow. Not that I don't know of any summary necessarily of all the features. Generally speaking, we've tried to add as many features as we can to the original G3X, the non-touch. We can't add everything there. There's some growth limitations, but feel free to email us directly, g3expert@garmin.com, or call. We'd be happy to answer if there's any specific features that you'd like to know if it's in the legacy system.
Cool. All right. Well, let's see. 5 more minutes here. Let's keep jamming on some questions.
All right.
Rodrigo's wondering, can you use graphical flight plan editing if your flight plan source is external?
You can use graphical flight plan editing on the GTN. It also supports that feature. If you want to use the G3X to do the graphical flight plan editing, you do need to turn it over to the internal mode. There are ways to edit the flight plan on the G3X's internal mode and then send it back over to the GTN. So I would say it's probably going to be nicer to just go ahead and do that on the GTN. But if you're in external mode, you're not going to be able to edit the flight plan. I think that's kind of what the question was toward.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to edit it on the G3X.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see. Walt's wondering, does the engine monitoring use standard sensors or something Garmin proprietary only?
We have it so it's completely customizable. And so no matter what you might have there, we can, as long as it's electrically compatible with our GEA24, that's the interface module that we use, you can completely customize your gauges. So it doesn't have to be the Garmin sensor kit, but we do have those available for common engine installations.
Okay. And a couple questions about the SD cards, wondering, is there any ability to have something bigger than an 8 gigabyte?
Currently, we just use the 8 gigabyte. That's the recommendation. We also recommend that you keep database cards separate for software loading and database loading. So, for example, you might want to have a dedicated SD card that's just completely free of any extra information that you use for leaving in the display, so it'll log data, and then manage your databases on another card, and we find that works really well. So get around that a little bit, but 8 gigabytes should cover most anything you're going to load to the system.
Okay. Richard says, I currently have a traditional non-touch G3X 2-screen system. Is it possible to swap one of the 2 non-touch screens for a touch screen, or do I have to replace both screens?
Yeah, so we don't support mixing the non-touch and the touchscreen displays. There's some user interface challenges and just compatibility issues there. So if you want to go to the touchscreen, we'd say you need to either go from 2 to 1. Maybe you want to replace 2 of the legacy and go to 1 10-inch. We have some good luck there because the connectors are common. It's fairly easy to combine the 2 legacy display connectors and plumb them into a single 10, but mixing and matching does not work.
Okay. Daniel was wondering, can other autopilots be integrated into the G3X?
Yeah, there are some third-party autopilots specifically from TrueTrack that can be integrated. So if you've already got a TrueTrack autopilot and you want to know if that specific model is, I'd say send us your information and we can verify for you.
Okay, cool. And Stevens?
Before I move on, there is also a Trio autopilot that's compatible as well. So if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us and we can get you taken care of.
Great. Stephen is wondering, I have the G3X for lean assist. The cyan EGT below the cylinders doesn't appear. Is configuration required?
There is you have to turn the lean assist functionality on, and so you would want to make sure you've done that first, and that would be something I'd recommend going into the installation manual and look for the lean assist function, and it should be fairly straightforward to turn that on.
Okay. Does the Comm split function work with a GMA 240, Chris asks?
I'm not aware of any split Comm functionality in the GMA 240. I don't think that's supported there.
Okay.
And yeah, I'd say follow up with us if you have any further questions about it. I may not be the audio panel guru, but I don't believe that supports that.
All right. Well, on that, I know we got some other questions that have come in here that we didn't get to in our extended period of Q&A here for the last 15 minutes. So I would encourage anybody that didn't get their question answered by Brian tonight, just please follow up with Brian with his contact information on the screen. Brian, man, that was a really comprehensive, well done presentation. I know it's not easy to do this sort of presentation where you're having to show you know, how a click and what happens with it. I think you did a great job with it. Thank you so much. I know a lot of people chimed in saying it was a really good presentation as well. So please just share any closing comments you want. It looks like we had probably about 180 people log in tonight, so we had a nice turnout.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I really do appreciate the opportunity to provide the information out there. I hope everybody took something away from it and has a little better understanding of how the system works. And I hope you come see us at the shows. We've got upcoming seminars you can find on our website. We'll be at Oshkosh, of course, with all our bells and whistles. So if you get a chance, please come see us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian. And to everybody who tuned in tonight and stayed with us a little bit longer, we really appreciate you sticking with us. And thank you a lot for joining us tonight. And hope you can join us next week for next week's weekly webinar with the EAA webinar series. Have a great night, everybody.